I'm having it's a problem with having this many devices. I'm just going to use the mic in my laptop. So if it sounds bad again, just let me know and I'll figure out something else. But my system was overloaded, I think, with devices here. All right, I think I think we're ready, Ashley.
All right, sounds good. Welcome everybody to the 983rd meeting of the North Carolina Board of Pharmacy. I'm going to first of all read the ethics statement, if that works for everyone. In accordance with the State Government Ethics Act, it is the duty of every board member to avoid both conflicts of interest and appearance of conflict. Does any board member have any known conflicts of interest or appearance of conflicts with respect to any matter coming before the board today? If so, please identify the conflict or appearance of conflict and refrain from any participation in the particular matter involved. Okay, seeing that there are none, we'll move into the consideration of the April meeting minutes. Does anyone have any comments or questions about the April meeting minutes? It appears that there are none, so is there a motion to approve the April meeting minutes?
So moved.
So Bill is making the motion. Is there a second? Michelle seconds that. So all in favor say aye. Andy?
Aye.
Wallace?
Aye.
Keith? Aye. Michelle?
Aye.
And Bill?
Aye.
Aye as well. So the April meeting minutes carry. So, Jay,
Madam President, yep, the next thing we'll move into is the selection of board officers and committee appointments. So just a couple of quick things on that. As you all know, the board has two officers who are selected by a majority vote of the board members. All board members may serve in either the president or vice presidential position. Election is by majority of vote. Just quickly for committee appointments, I put a note in your memo for today. Obviously, the new president will make the appointments to the various board committees. I did note that while traditionally the president usually does that at this meeting, there's no requirement that the president do that. So for all or some of the committee appointments, certainly however y'all would want to proceed, you could appoint them all today. Or for some or all, you could hold those appointments till the June meeting to solicit input on not a right or wrong way to do that. So with that then, Ashley, I hand it back to you all for the selection of the board president and board vice president.
All righty. So do we have any nominations for the board president?
I'd like to nominate Mr. Bill Mixon for president of the board.
Okay.
I have a question, and I've kind of been batting this around for a bit, and trying to understand exactly how you guys have done this in the past. Not trying to muddy any waters, but it just seems, and if this position is largely ceremonial, it just seems like a year is not a long enough term to get much accomplished if someone has an agenda more like in a traditional role. But like I said, if this is more ceremonial, I just would like to, I know where I'm going with this, I would just like to have some consideration made for us looking at changing the structure, going to committee work, also looking at, is this going to stay a strictly ceremonial position, and how are we going to do it in the future?
I mean, I can speak to that from and I think some other people on the board have been around a little bit, can make some comments too. Michelle, traditionally for a long time, it was a ceremonial position that kind of within the confines of the group, people took turns. And if someone didn't want to serve in that capacity, then they could certainly not. And then we had some folks that shall remain nameless that decided that they wanted to be the president every year, and they would create issues among the board members with lobbying to remain president for multiple terms. And so we, as a group, I think the group that's in front of you now, which includes you, made a move to try and get us back to a more collegial process of selecting board members a little bit, or excuse me, not board members, but officers, in a little more forward way, without behind the scenes conversations and lobbying with one another and so forth. And so we just have gotten to the point where we're back on this rotation. And if we wanted to talk about terms and length of terms, I'd certainly be willing to listen to that. But I just want you to know from a historic perspective that this was a difficult thing for many of us over the last 4, 5, 6 years. And so we just have gotten it back to something that we don't all dread in May. And I'll just leave it at that and let other people comment.
Well, it's not quite just necessarily a ceremonial position. I think there is a lot of work that the president does. I mean, I served prior to Ashley, and as far as meeting prep and trying to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed before we get to this point, every month. But I viewed it as a team, basically as being the head coach of the team versus it being someone, as far as someone trying to drive an agenda, because each board member, has things that we really care about in areas of pharmacy practice that we would like to see, we would like to, make an impact, on, during our time. But, I don't know if especially the present group, has necessarily anybody has an agenda other than just to work together to improve, to protect the health and safety of the citizens of North Carolina and to hopefully improve our profession. That's really, I think, collectively. I mean, that's what I can't speak for everybody else, but that's my impression of everyone else.
And that's what I wanted. I wanted that historical perspective on it. And I don't mean when I say agenda, I don't mean some hidden agenda. I meant something that is burning in, desire that's an issue in the industry that they want to move forward. So I just kind of wanted to put it out there though, because I guess I do. Nobody has lobbied me. Let me just put that out there as the new kid on the block. Nobody has lobbied me, but I guess I just kind of look at what experience I've seen with other boards, and a year is a short term. And I do feel then the empath in me does say this was really probably a horrible year to be president because of COVID and the like. So, Ashley didn't get a real good shake at it. And Ashley had nothing to do with me saying that. Okay. So I just kind of want to put it out there in terms of any structural changes that we're making, like relative to the committee work or process and procedure changes. I just want to look at it globally and not just do it as a one-off and see how that impacts the rest of the work.
Well,
so
Michelle,
with that, forward.
I think it was a very good question, honestly. And I totally agree with Andy and Keith's statements, comments. The board president that is a leadership position, but it's, and there's some, leading the meeting, I guess, is the ceremonial part, but I think it's a little more than that. I think a year is a good break. We've had some presidents that served for 2 years for various reasons, and that's been spoken to. I think what we're doing with an annual turnover is, as far as I'm concerned, after 9 years on the board, it's worked well. And if I am elected president, I certainly don't have any other agenda other than just to have a good working relationship with everybody.
And I will speak to that for just a moment, that I feel like the group of board members that we have now, if there is something that we passionately feel about, like if there's something that we really want to accomplish just as a board, I feel like that I could come to anybody on the board, whether you're president or not, and say, this is something I'm really passionate about. Can you help me? And you know, for Bill, if there's something that I really didn't get to do this year, I'm going to go to Bill, and I know Bill's got my back, and he's going to help me, you know, to work on whatever maybe we didn't get accomplished this year. That is a burning desire if that were to be, you know, the case. So I think we have a great group of people that we're all going to work together, and I think that's a very good thing. And I'm happy that we're there.
And one other thought that popped into my head for Michelle is I don't think these questions are unique. This is typical for a new board member. And I think we do a poor job, maybe to some extent at this time of year, every year, making sure that the folks that are new to the board know what we're doing. And we probably need to do better with that. I'm not blaming anybody on that. I think we just need to be cognizant of the fact that, like, you get on the board and you roll around to May and that person has no experience whatsoever with the process, and everybody else seems to know what's going on. And then the new guy's going, what's going on here? And so I think we need to do better with that, whether it's in this case with Michelle or in the future with somebody else, of explaining what we're doing and what the intents are. And I think, back to what Michelle said, I think we should always look at, is this the best way to do it, or are we doing it because this is how we've always done it? So, I'm glad to entertain anybody's ideas. I think, as Ashley said, we've got a good group here, and everybody's pretty open with one another and willing to discuss things and not have any veiled or hidden agendas. And so that's awesome that we have that.
I certainly look forward to the time when we can all get together again in person, and have informal conversations before the meeting, after the meeting, during lunch.
Yeah.
Whenever.
I'll make one comment. From my experience, the first time I was on the board, the 10 years then, is that, having this kind of a rotation kind of thing, I really think builds relationships in a way that everybody works together. I mean, during that 10 years, I think I can honestly say that if there were any concerns or issues, everybody was sort of in it together. And, it didn't really matter which one of us was president at the particular time. And I don't know, it just seemed to work well. I mean, I've had a lot of experience on a lot of different boards, from, school boards and county commissions and whatever. So, I mean, I've just had a lot of experience on stuff like that. And there was some collegiality that was on the Board of Pharmacy that I'm not sure was captured in a lot of the other boards and things. And I don't know, it just seemed to work. So it was just, I just sort of accepted that that's, when I came on, it was sort of, I accepted it sort of that was the way it was. We would rotate that role, and it seemed to work pretty well. But I think if we want to really discuss that, then we can, probably put that on when we have a retreat, if it's something that needs to be, hashed out and talked about, and see if there is any real feel for changing things. That would be a good forum in which to do that, I think.
I was going to suggest exactly what Wallace just did, which is I think these are good discussions to have. And when we have our next retreat, we will have had some experience with the different meeting schedule and the different committee structures. And it strikes me that might be the perfect time, with some experience on all of those, to have what I think Michelle is properly raised, which is sort of a holistic discussion of board governance and structure issues. So I think, Wallace, I think that's a great suggestion from a staff standpoint anyway.
All right. So, Michelle, do you feel like that answers the question? Are you comfortable with that? Okay.
I am.
Okay.
And
All right,
thank
so-
you for bringing it up. That's the value of different perspectives and
Yep.
new blood.
Yeah, I
Well,
agree. Michelle,
It
I
proves
think
once
that's-
again, we got a great public member appointment. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're kind.
I would agree. All right, so we have Bill nominated for president. Do we have anyone nominated for vice president? Or do we need to vote on, I mean, like, I don't know. I can't remember how we do this, Joe. You'll have to remind me.
You can handle it either way you'd like to. I would suggest going ahead because if you got a nomination and a second on the nomination, I'd go ahead and vote for president.
Okay.
And then move on to vice president.
Okay. Anyone, Bill?
Did you entertain are there any other nominations for president?
So someone needs to move to close nominations.
All right. Thank
That
you,
a
Andy.
motion?
for your help. So we're closing nominations for the board president. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Yeah.
So
Why don't we, for the minute purposes, we'll take that as a motion from Andy to close nominations and a second from Wallace.
okay. So all in favor of Bill as our new president, please say
Wait a
aye.
minute.
Oh,
You need to vote on the closing nominations first.
okay. Sorry.
That's all right.
Bill, do you want to take over?
No.
You're doing a great job.
Yeah,
All
just,
right, Jay,
yeah,
what do I need to do again now?
let's call for a vote on the seconded motion to close nominations.
Okay.
Let's do that first.
Okay. Was that Wallace?
Yes. Yeah, I seconded it, Ashley.
No, we're
Okay.
good. So we have a
We need
motion
to do a
on
roll
the table
call.
to close nominations. So go ahead, Ashley, and do a roll call through the
Okay.
members.
All right. So all in favor say aye. Michelle?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Let's see, Andy?
Aye.
Wallace?
Aye.
And I as well. So Bill is our new president.
Well, no, now we've got
Okay.
a motion still on the table for Bill as the sole nominee that has been seconded. So now would be the appropriate time, Ashley, to call for a vote on Bill as the president.
All righty, let's do
See,
that now.
I
I should have gone over this with you, Jay, yesterday. Sorry.
I'm
No
also
problem.
in favor of closing the nomination.
All right, Bill is in favor.
I
I
will
forgot.
recuse
you.
myself from voting for president.
All right, all in favor. Michelle?
Aye. I think we're
Andy.
voting for the president right now,
I
right?
think so.
That is
yes.
correct.
Ashley appears to have quit as president 5 minutes early.
I totally should have got some advice on this from Jay, so I would have done it appropriately. And
No, you're doing just fine. Just
Okay, this for-
Additional evidence.
All right, Michelle said aye, Andy.
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
aye. Wallace,
Aye.
and I as well. And so we're good, right? Bill is president.
That's correct. Bill has been elected president. Now would be the appropriate time to entertain motion nominations for the position of board vice president.
Okay.
I just
So-
want to say thank you, board members.
All right. So I would like to nominate Wallace as the vice president nominee.
I would like to second that nomination.
Okay. So any other nominations that we have?
Motion to close nominations.
All right. So there are no other nominations. So we have a motion to close nominations. Does anyone second that motion?
Second.
All right. Michelle is seconding that motion. So now we need to vote. Jay?
That's right. Let's vote on the motion and seconded to close nominations.
Okay, let's vote to do that. So all in favor say aye. Michelle?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Keith?
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Wallace,
Aye.
I as well. Now
And
we're
now-
going to vote.
Correct.
All righty. All in favor for Wallace as vice president, please say aye. Andy,
Aye.
Michelle,
Aye.
Keith,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
and I as well. So congratulations, Wallace. You are vice president.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the faith. I guess is a good word.
And I would just
I'm sorry, go right ahead, Ashley.
I would just like to say it's been a pleasure this past year. It's certainly been a trying year, but I think that we have accomplished some great things together. And Bill and Wallace, congratulations. And Bill, I know you'll do a better job next year of doing nominations than I did.
Oh, don't
I'm
be
not
so-
trying to slack, so.
Ashley, I want to say on behalf of staff, what an absolute pleasure it has been having you as the president in an extremely tough year. Your leadership, your accessibility, your even-keeled approach to some very serious issues over the course of the year certainly made staff's job a lot easier. So
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Job well done, Ashley.
Thank you.
Here, here.
I
Appreciate-
agree. Second
Appreciate your
motion.
service.
Thank y'all.
Great job.
So-
And Wallace, as the vice president, you will have to continue Skyping in from a distance as our designated survivor. Yeah.
I missed that
Actually,
show.
when it comes to May of 2022, since this is my last year on the board, I won't be present at the May meeting. So we may have to do election of officers a little differently.
Yeah, we can figure that out. There's no worry on that, Bill.
We may do them in April. We may not do them at all. We may let Wallace run that part of it. We'll just have to see. Shall I take over, Ashley?
Yes, yes, indeed, Mr. President. And let me ask real quick, I keep hearing a beep that I don't think is coming from inside the room. So just a quick reminder for the members of the public who are attending, if you would please mute your microphones. Thank you. And the beep seems to have disappeared. So either that worked or I was hallucinating temporarily, either way. So, Mr. President, as you know, the next item on the agenda or next piece of this item on the agenda would be committee appointments, which is the president's prerogative on that. And we can certainly proceed into that now if you'd like, or whatever process you would like.
I would like to keep the committees as they are until next month and have a more thorough discussion of committee appointments at the June meeting.
That sounds good to hear from a staff perspective, and Bill obviously can help you in any way you want with that between now and the next meeting.
I'd like to have a little dialogue with the current committee members to see what their wishes and desires are.
Perfect.
And, so that brings us to the DME committee member appointment. Let me back up. So are board members okay with us having a more thorough discussion on appointments at the June meeting? Is there a consensus on that? Okay.
Absolutely. That sounds great to me, Bill.
DME committee member appointments, Jay, is that something that we need to act on?
You do not need to act on it today because as with any other committee, the members of that committee will continue to serve until and unless replaced. But Bill, thank you for that specific segue because I did have a piece of information I wanted to give you on that. With respect to the DME members of that committee, Cindy Parham contacted Mr. Dressen, Mr. Dahlberg, and Mr. Tanucci to ask about their desires with respect to continued service on the DME committee. Mr. Dressen and Dahlberg both said they would be happy to continue serving on the DME committee. Mr. Tanucci, who is a representative of the medical equipment suppliers, said that he would like to step down from that committee at the appropriate time. So, Bill, given the decision to wait to June, what I would suggest is that Cindy could put out a notice that there is going to be a vacancy. Well, we could do it however you prefer. We could put out a request for interest from all segments of the DME world for service on the DME committee, or we could just put out a request for a medical equipment supplier, and that would give you some folks to consider, Bill.
I'm gonna leave that to Cindy's judgment.
Okay.
Whichever.
Well, let me ask you this way: would you, Bill, be comfortable with Mr. Dressen and Mr. Dahlberg continuing their service on the DME committee? If
Yes.
you are, then we can just put out a request for medical equipment suppliers who are interested. Otherwise, we can, or if you'd like to consider some alternatives, we can put out a request for each of the members.
I see no reason to rock the boat on that.
Okay, so we'll just put it out. We'll put out that there is going to be a vacancy for the medical equipment supplier member of the DME committee, and we'll solicit interest in candidates for you, Bill.
Thank you.
You bet.
As far as the North Carolina PHP Board of Directors, I would ask not just for that committee, but for any of these committees, if you have a particular interest, please email me and Jay, copy Jay on that, and Clint, and let me know your desires. I've been on the PHP Board of Directors for, seems like 3, maybe 4 meetings. So it's a quarterly meeting. I'd say we discuss that in June also, if that's okay.
Yep, sure.
Well, in the meantime, Jay, just get to recirculate all the committees that are in place and who's on each one.
Absolutely. I will recirculate that memo you've got in your meeting packets as a standalone document. So you'll have that too.
Yeah, we've got budget and finance, DME, telepharmacy, opioid crisis, Haywood Fund Committee, LSP Revision Committee, permit meeting, Pharmacist Manager Education Committee, Intern Registration System Committee, and Long-Acting Injectable Committee. And I guess of those, they're all ad hoc except for Budget and Finance, DME. I guess that's really the only 2. Is that right, Jay, that are going to be?
That's correct. That's correct.
There is the workplace committee too, right?
Right. I didn't add that actually, since that was literally just created, but I will update the memo on that that I circulate to everybody.
Thank you.
I just thought it would be good if you circulate it to everybody. If anybody wants to communicate using that email, it would would make it real easy.
Yep. I am more than happy to do that. Very good.
And there's the Clinical Pharmacist Practitioner Advisory Committee. Liaison.
Well, remember that's our liaison. For what it's worth, Bill, I will say that from a staff perspective, we sure have appreciated your doing that. I would suggest giving some consideration to having Bill continue in that role, but somebody else come on as sort of an understudy. Because come May of next year, we're going to need somebody else who's ready to step in to work with the CPP Advisory Committee to review those applications. So I would say folks should start giving some thought to that, especially.
We had a prior conversation about that, and my recollection was Wallace was going to step up to that. If anybody else wants to be considered for that, then you and Wallace can arm wrestle for it publicly.
Yep.
I'll be glad to talk to anybody about whether, if somebody has a real desire to serve in that role, and we'll talk about it. I think so. If anybody can give me a call or whatever they want.
And I'll update the memo to reflect this discussion as well and send it around.
we certainly want people serving in roles that interest them and do not find it to be a burden. And I mean, personally, I don't think any of these committees would be a burden, but I want to make sure that we honor any or consider any particular areas of interest. And we may wind up not making any changes. Okay, anything else about that topic before we move on?
Nope.
Rulemaking update, Jay, we're looking forward to.
Yeah, so obviously very quick update on rulemaking. As you know, we have two proposed rulemakings that are in the process of notice and comment. The proposed remote medication order entry rule, which is scheduled for a public hearing on July 20th. So that continues along. And then the limited service permit proposed revisions. And Clint, I think I'm right, that's scheduled for a public hearing in June. Isn't that right? Or is that one July? They're both in July. Yeah. So the comment period is open. Board staff are monitoring the dedicated email address for that, and we'll compile those and have them ready for you in July. But that's it on that, Bill.
When does the comment period close for these two?
For both, it would close at the conclusion of the public hearing on July 20th.
Okay.
Technically, it's at the start of the public
Yeah.
hearing. But
Okay.
Thank you, Clint.
so nobody hand up a written comment during the public hearing.
Have there been any comments submitted?
Not yet. I'm starting to get some informal outreach on some of the remote medication order entry stuff, but so far, no submitted comments on either rule.
Is there a contingency if more than an hour is needed to consider these?
Oh, yeah. I mean, when we get to it in July, obviously, after the hearing, first of all, during the public hearing, it will be the chair, your discretion, Bill, as to how long to allow comments to go on. And then depending on the comment volume, of course, the board has a duty, as you all know, to assess all comments that come in. If we get a lot of comments on either or both of those rules by the close of the period in July, it may well be that the appropriate action at that time would be to take the matter under advisement and give us time between July and the September meeting to further consider and analyze the comments and then decide what action is appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Sounds like a good plan. That brings us to committee progress reports. Unless any of the other board members had questions or comments about the rulemaking update. Thank you.
Committee updates, members and Mr. President, real quick, running through those. The Telepharmacy Committee, obviously, which are members Vance, Bowman, and Nelson. Notice and comment is underway on the RMOE rule, and I think you all know that the committee has decided to next take up consideration of direct-to-patient dispensing technology. Staff's gathering some materials on that. So members of that committee as presently composed, I intend to reach out to you all next week to see about getting a session set up for June to get back together and talk about next steps on that. So I'll be in touch next week. Limited Service Permit Revision Committee, again, as you all know, we have the rule underway. So nothing to do on that. Permit meeting, pharmacist manager education, that's Ashley and Keith, supported by staff. And Ashley and Keith, I know that committee is continuing to do work, and Missy is continuing to compile that. So there is a deadline for presentation of recommendations to the board at the meeting next month. And my sense is that y'all are on track to do that. Unless I hear anything.
Excuse me, Jay, do you have a
Sure.
sense for how that educational process what it might look like?
Well, I don't have anything to, I'm not running that committee as the staff level. Missy's doing that, but I know that the committee is continuing to consider things. Ashley and Keith, I don't know if you have anything you want to add now.
Missy's done a phenomenal job this through the whole process.
Yeah, and Bill, she is working with a production company because the plan is to have almost like not necessarily a PowerPoint presentation because that's kind of old school, but a presentation that pharmacy managers can go through. We're working on trying to do some kind of short questionnaire to make sure that folks are comprehending everything. Obviously, we can't make that graded, but just something so that we can quiz their knowledge on that to make sure that they don't have any additional questions once they are going through that training. So that's going to be kind of a fun training with some animation just to kind of keep their attention. But that's what Missy's working on currently with that, in conjunction with Josh and Crystal on that.
And I'm sure you've anticipated the likelihood that pharmacists, managers will have additional questions and need for clarification on this point or that.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Jay.
Intern registration system committee, that's Keith and Andy, and the committee has not yet met as a committee. Missy and I have completed our initial round of fact finding and compiling the results of that. So Keith and Andy, she and I will be in touch with you also over the next couple of weeks to get set up to have a discussion. I think we're just about ready to frame that up as to what our options would be on that. Long-acting injectable rulemaking committee, that's Keith and Andy. That committee met and has discussed a draft rule that would implement the long-acting injectable authority granted to pharmacists by State Law 2021-3, which, as you all know, was a COVID relief bill. Committee staff at direction of the committee members has reached out to the medical and nursing boards to review the draft and provide input. The nursing board has provided input. They are comfortable with the draft. We're still awaiting input from the medical board, but recall the process for this is we need to have a temporary rule in place by October 1st of this year, which is the same time that the statutory authority becomes live. So we are directed by the legislature to have a temporary rule in place. We are obviously, the reason we're consulting with the nursing and medical boards now is that any permanent rulemaking falls under the provision of law that requires at least assent among the medical, pharmacy, and nursing boards to have a permanent rule. Clearly, we would prefer to put a temporary rule in place that those boards are comfortable with so we don't have a lengthy sort of second round. So we're working on that. We do need to have something presented to you all for a temporary rule at the June meeting in order to meet our deadline. I feel confident we will be able to do that.
Very good. Great reports. Do any board members have any questions about anything that Jay has presented as far as the committees? It's exciting times.
Indeed it is.
So, Jay, how long do you anticipate needing for the legislative report and the supplemental report? I'm wondering about taking a break.
Yeah, not a super long time, but I do think, Bill, this would be a natural point to take a short break.
I've got 10:45. Would 11 a.m. sharp be appropriate to reconvene? Great. So
Good
be it.
here. All right, thanks.
Andy, I am starting to get used to my progressives, except when I'm using my big old honking second monitor. It's close enough that I can see like the middle of the screen and nothing on the outside.
I've been doing them I'm trying to think how long it's been, but I can vividly remember it's probably been a solid 5 to 7 years since I've been doing progressives. And I can remember like you're experiencing it's a weird transition. I felt like walking up steps that I was going to fall right over. Of course,
Yeah.
my prescription's horrible. I don't know about you, but I'm a plus 7.5 in one eye and a plus 6.5 in the other eye, plus astigmatism in one eye. So anyway, which way are you? Are you a plus or a minus person?
I don't know.
Plus.
I don't even get my prescription. I just say, give me my glasses right here.
I got you.
So I don't know. But no, the first day I was sitting here like, there it is.
Y'all, I'm the same way. I don't have purely progressive. I mean, I have line second lenses, but yeah, monitors, when you're using multiple monitor setups, has proven to me to be by far the most challenging for trying to hit the sweet spot. That's why sometimes when I'm on these meetings, you'll see me like craning my neck back and forth. I'm not having some involuntary neck spasms. I'm trying to get the transition just where I can see both. It's also an issue on the car radio. It seems like as I look over to that, it's also in that sort of weird in between.
Yeah, I mean, of the many things, when you get to that 40, 50 range and stuff starts falling apart, the one that's probably been the most noticeable for me, and you maybe can appreciate this, Jay, is that when I wake up in the morning, if I don't immediately put my glasses on, I will fall over. I will run into something. It's, you know what? Getting old's tough.
I forget.
Yeah, it was interesting that my one sentence post about getting progressives was by far my most popular post with my contemporaneously old people friends on Facebook.
Yeah.
Because everyone had an experience to share.
Yeah.
I haven't had any issues with mine, except parking. I have found that I don't judge, getting in between the lines as well as I used to. Or maybe I'm just a bad driver. I don't know. But
I was going to say that's what you told the person you hit anyway, right?
That's why I don't park next to anybody. I always try to find.
You're from West Virginia. Eyes aren't y'all's issue. It's teeth, right? I think it's.
Oh, now, Andy.
Stereotype.
I am looking forward to the next time we're together in person and Keith settles that particular score.
There's a very fine line between West Virginia and Western Virginia, my
Yeah, I
friend.
was getting ready to say that. You live very close to that border.
My wife grew up 10 miles from that border, so I married close too. So
Once you get past Pilot Mountain, it's all the same.
yeah, I agree. Hey Jay, as you're looking for dates for some of those committees that you mentioned, can you just put in your memory bank that I'm on vacation for the next 2 weeks starting Sunday.
Okay.
So if we can avoid the first week of June, that'd be great.
I don't think that's a problem. We don't have anything that's so time sensitive that that's a problem.
10-4.
Wallace, I want to come to your porch.
Yeah, look at that.
Well, come on, I got rid of the pig in the bottle. Sort of like the pig in a blanket, but it's a pig in a bottle. So I got rid of that for Clint's, for Clint. I mean, it's all just especially for Clint.
This is much nicer.
Now.
I'm going to
It's-
Wallace's house next meeting.
Well, come on, it's too nice a day, I mean, it's beautiful out there,
I love
Wow.
I love cypress trees.
What a
And I love looking at the background.
What a place for a retreat. That would be a good board retreat location, actually.
We'll set you up down here if you want to come down here. We got several spots we could pick up, to have something down here.
Oh, wow.
I'm making a note.
The trouble is there's so much background light. I guess I'm.
I'm going to be down your way for 2 weeks, Wallace. We need to hook up.
Let's do. I was okay. If you're going to be at the beach, we will definitely make it work.
We need to go to a Blue Moon Beach Grill and
Absolutely, my favorite place.
Yep.
That Kill Double Grill, Collington Cafe.
Yep.
Lunch at O'Neill's,
Uh-huh.
Munchies.
Yep.
Yep,
We can make a day of it.
that sounds like a plan. Let's do it. Let's make it
Stop
happen.
at what is it? The Kill Devil Distillery there in Manio.
Oh yeah, we can check that out. They're
Have a little
dispensing. They're dispensing.
Yeah. Yes. Dispensing. Yes.
I need
Is there
pictures
still
of y'all hang gliding.
Is there still a brewery in Manio, Wallace?
Weeping Radish. It's
Yeah.
in Currituck now, isn't it? Do they still do stuff in Manio, or
No,
didn't they
the
move
the place in Manio is gone. It's only up there in Currituck, like you talked about now.
Yeah.
There used to be, some of y'all, Wallace, you probably remember, there used to be a Weeping Radish in Durham. And it was it was the same folks as in Manio. It closed some years ago, but Weeping Radish did used to have a smaller brewing operation in a restaurant in Durham.
What, Andy? Isn't it? That is the one that's in Currituck now, right? I mean,
That's right.
Yeah.
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 Yep. There's also a big there's a big water park up there you pass by on the way to that near when you're going to Coinjock and
Yeah.
Well, maybe we need to have our June meeting at the beach.
Hey, let's go.
I see Michelle's jumped right into that.
Bill, I'm showing 11, and we got
Yes,
everybody
sir.
back, so
Let's
good to proceed
reconvene.
if you are.
Mr. Campbell, if you'll give us a legislative report.
Very good. I'm going to start. So you guys have a legislative report and then a supplemental legislative report. I would like to start, and the reason for that is, as you know, I was gone last week to Chicago, and there was a lot of stuff happening last week. So I did a supplemental memo. So I would like to start with the supplemental memo, and then back up to the just sort of a table reset on other legislative issues. In terms of things in which there have been substantial movement and or changes, there are two bills to bring your attention to specifically, both of which we've talked about before. The first is H96. Now, again, you all know that in the COVID relief bill, there was a granting of an ability for pharmacists to administer long-acting injectables, but there is a broader bill concerning injectable drugs, and that's H96, which we've discussed before. That bill got a committee hearing on May 11th in the House, and then immediately was passed by the full House. It's now moved over to the Senate and has been assigned to the Senate Rules Committee, which I think all of you or most of you know. That's where a lot of bills go for Senate leadership to decide which of them is going to get a hearing and when it's going to go. But there were some fairly substantial changes to the injectable bill as it came out of the House. Specifically, it would require by April 1st of next year, the pharmacy and medical boards to adopt implementing rules and drug-specific written protocols that I misspelled may in the memo, may include continuing education requirements. And more specifically, if this version passed, it would require the medical and pharmacy boards to establish and maintain a list of drugs and biologicals that pharmacists could administer, including specific protocols for each drug or biologic that a pharmacist could administer. From a staff perspective, this obviously is potentially a lot of work, and essentially would involve coming up with a formulary. We would have to maintain that formulary in cooperation with the Med Board going forward, adding, I guess, new drugs as they came along, and having specific protocols for each drug in that. Now, there are approaches, if the Med Board were amenable, that could get at this perhaps in a more categorical way. But it's I just wanted to point this out, and certainly it would, any guidance, anything you would like to communicate to the sponsors of this bill or others that are considering, but that's a big change. I had been concerned earlier that that a version of this bill could inadvertently strip pharmacists of the ability to administer vaccines that are not injectable. I do not have that concern anymore because this provision would be an entirely separate category, and it leaves intact the existing vaccine administration paragraph. So that's the issue. So it's out of the House and on to the Senate with these requirements for essentially creating and maintaining a formulary and drug-specific protocols for any drug or biologic that a pharmacist could administer. And I forgot to reiterate, this would be the pharmacist can administer these drugs to adult patients that's 18 and up, at least chronologically an adult, 18 and up, pursuant to your prescription. So that's the status of that bill.
Well, Jay, isn't there a Senate bill? I know there's the one that you have down here about contraceptives, but I thought there was one in the Senate that was broader than just contraceptives, that had to do with I guess long-acting antipsychotics and things like that. Is that?
No, no. There are some piecemeal things that are. I think what you're describing, Wallace, is S575, which is the next bill I'm going to talk about, which had an awful lot of things in it, but has been substantially pared down as it came out of the Senate. So that's you're right that we'll talk about that one, but the injectable one out of the House is the only one that talks about a broad administration of injectable authority.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a question I have is there, obviously we can proceed with this any way you want. Is there any communication that you would like me to make concerning this bill to the sponsors with respect to the drug-specific protocols or any other item in there? Or would you rather just sit back and see what happens on this one?
Are we talking about House Bill 96 only, or including
Correct.
575?
Well, I want to talk about 575 separately, so I'm just talking about 96 right now.
So Jay, one of my biggest concerns is that if there's a new drug come to market, like how long is that going to take us to get approved to be able to give that vaccine? It just seems like with the things that are in this bill that it seems almost like it has to be approved before we can give it, even if it's in the same category of other things that we're already able to give. It just seems like that seems to be a little bit, a lot of stuff going on there that maybe seems excessive, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's the aspect, Ashley, of as it's composed, like I say, it really requires a joint creation of a formulary, and it's not just a one-time project. You're right, Ashley, there would have to be a constant sort of monitoring and updating of that as new drugs came to the market, or I guess potentially as drugs went off of the market.
I mean, it seems like we could do categories of drugs. And I mean, obviously, if there's information about how it needs to be given, then that should be the responsibility of the pharmacist to be able to know how to do that. I may be off here, but it seems like a lot.
My comment would be that obviously this is going to call for a committee from each board with some sort of staff support from maybe the colleges of pharmacy for drug information and other kind of support to help research and write these protocols, and then the committee will approve them. And Joe's right, there's going to be a lot of work there. I mean, it's good, and it's achievable, but it's I'm not sure how it would be implemented. But that shouldn't stop us, I guess, from embracing it.
No, I certainly agree that whatever version, if any version comes out, we will certainly step up and meet the challenge that's in front of us. I just wanted to emphasize this for thinking about sort of long-term administration of this provision. Ashley, your notion of suggesting, does this need to be, when they say drug specific, does that mean it has to be each individual product, or does that mean it could be categories of drugs or the like? I think that's, from where I sit, that's a pretty good question to ask or point to emphasize.
Yeah, and I guess one other question would be the continuing education requirements. I mean, pharmacists anyway have to do the immunization CEs, but what additional CEs would be required to do this? I mean, would there specifically have to be one on injectable drugs? I mean, that seems, I don't know.
And fortunately, Ashley, the bill as stated does say may include CEs. It doesn't say shall include.
Okay.
So I do think you're right that there will be a discussion there about, maybe immunizing pharmacists already know how to administer IM deltoid and sub-Q triceps. Long-acting injectables, it seems to be likely that there's going to be a requirement that obtain additional training on how to give a deep IM injection in the gluteal area. We've been talking about that for the LEI stuff. But technique beyond that, I'm with you, Ashley. It's a little hard to imagine what additional training there would need to be in terms of technique. As to the drugs, my position would be every pharmacist we license in this state has already had to demonstrate that they have sufficient knowledge, skill, and safety to deal with all drugs on the market. So I would hope that this wouldn't devolve into, well, if you're going to inject insulin, you've got to have a CE on what insulin is and how you do it, or go on down the road. But I think that's an implementation issue, obviously, Ashley. And again, I'm thankful that this version of the rule does say may and not shall on that, as opposed to the language about drug-specific written protocols, which is a mandate, not a suggestion.
Well, from my perspective, I think we ought to communicate, and board members chime in if you don't agree, but that we ought to communicate that we're in favor of the rule, at least from the 5,000 foot level. And the devil will be in the details as far as implementing it, but we should encourage it.
Would y'all be comfortable, or would your instructions to me to send a letter to the sponsors and saying that the board supports, as we did for some other things already this year, that the board supports the appropriate expansion of a pharmacist's ability to provide services to patients, and we think this is absolutely a step in the right direction, but point out we do have some concerns about the practical aspects of implementing this authority under the bill as currently drafted, and would be interested in having further discussion about what drug-specific protocols and lists of drugs, about how that would be created and maintained, and would like to have some discussion on that. Is that a reasonable approach?
Yes.
I think it's perfectly well said.
Clint, am I missing anything on this one that?
No.
All right, I'm happy to do that, and in fact, we'll get that done today, based on your instruction on that. Bill, I'm happy to move on to S575 if you like.
Please.
So as you know, we've talked about this one, and the board has already communicated to the sponsors its support of this bill. So just to update, S575 came out of the Senate Health Committee shortly before the crossover deadline, and let me back up and apologize. I think remember the General Assembly has an internal operating rule in which by a certain date certain, if certain bills have not been approved by one chamber or the other, those bills can no longer be considered for the remainder of the legislative session, which runs through, as you all know, 2022. They're not continuously. So there was a lot of, that's why there was so much action last week, as the crossover deadline was, I believe, last Thursday or Friday. So that's why there was so much action, is to get bills that that required voting by one chamber or the other for crossover purposes to get that done. So S575, Senate Health approved what's called a committee substitute. It's just an amended version of the bill that did scale back the overall authorizations in that bill. What remains in the current version of the bill is it would expand immunization authority to administer ACIP recommended pediatric vaccines, all of them, not just flu. Remember, as it stands today, the only vaccine that pharmacists can administer to patients 6 and up is flu vaccine. Under state law, that it's different, of course, under the PrEP Act authorizations. But this bill, as currently formulated, would expand, as a matter of state law, the ability of pharmacists to administer ACIP recommended pediatric vaccines to any of those to patients 6 and up pursuant to prescription. It would allow pharmacists to prescribe and dispense medications for tobacco cessation, orally administered hormonal contraceptives, prenatal vitamins, and then what is still described in this bill as controlled substances for the prevention of HIV. That's PrEP. I think you all know what PrEP is. And of course, the drugs for PrEP are not controlled substances. So there continues to be sort of a bit of a perplexing drafting issue with those. But it is just a drafting issue and seems easy enough to correct. What was removed from that is there were certain other categories of things that pharmacists in the original bill could have prescribed and dispensed, and there was a provision in the original bill that would have authorized, subject to implementation by our board and the medical board, the ability for pharmacists to prescribe based on the results of certain CLIA-waived point of care diagnostic tests. That is gone. So that bill is still alive. It's now over in the House, but it is a much more narrow bill than the original one.
So Jay,
Excuse me, Ashley. What is PrEP? I'm sorry, I that's not ringing a bell.
PrEP is post-exposure prophylactic therapy. If you have someone who is exposed to a potential source of HIV infection, that they can immediately take what's called a PrEP course of therapy. It has an antiviral. I think there's at least one other drug in that. And of course, the key to that is getting very rapid access to PrEP to minimize the possibility of infection. So that's what that is, Bill.
So the ability that would be one of the groups of drugs that could be dispensed.
Yeah, that a pharmacist acting on the pharmacist's own authority would be able to prescribe and dispense would be PrEP therapy. It's a little bit strangely described as controlled substances,
okay,
which
yes,
they are not.
Okay.
But I think that's just a drafting mistake that continues to propagate through here.
Yes.
Jay, I just had a clarification question. The way I'm reading it, and this could be wrong, that in order to be able to, if this bill passes, to prescribe those medications, prenatal vitamins, you must either be a CPP or an immunizing pharmacist, or can any pharmacist do this?
No, that's correct. Under the bill, you would have to either be an immunizing pharmacist or a CPP. So obviously, Ashley, for the under the current version of this bill, under the vast majority of pharmacists who would be eligible to exercise this authority would be the pharmacists who have completed vaccination training. And it's certainly a bit of an oddity in that none of this really has anything to do with vaccination, but that's just the way that the bill has been drafted. They're putting this authority under the immunizing pharmacist.
I think most pharmacists at this point are probably immunizers anyway, so I can see that. And at least that opens it up, and it's not limiting it to CPPs.
No, it's not limited. It makes changes in both the immunizing pharmacist piece of the statute and in the CPP piece of the statute. I mean, look, at some level, if I were drafting this, and I'm not, obviously, if I were drafting this, I would have just made this a standalone authority and said, here are the qualifications a pharmacist has to do it. In fact, I don't think there's a need to have it in the CPP provision at all, because any pharmacist who would meet these other criteria doesn't having the CPP. I guess there could be a very small population of pharmacists who are CPPs but not immunizing pharmacists, but that would be a very, very slim number indeed. But it's awkward, Ashley. There's no question. It's awkward in its placement and phrasing. Not to say it's not a good thing. It clearly is, but we can work with the awkwardness. And yes, the vast majority of pharmacists in North Carolina now are immunizers. This bill obviously is one of NCAP's principal advocacy efforts, and I've had discussions, informal discussions, of course, with the NCAP staff, and have provided NCAP staff with your thoughts as you've expressed them during these meetings, and have stood by as a resource. So,
to me, it does illustrate the difficulty of developing public policy when it comes to defining who can do what.
yeah. There has been, and this won't be a surprise to any of you, there has been, and I'm sure will continue to be, significant pushback on this from various associations in North Carolina who advocate the interest of physicians. That's was the reason for the significant paring back of the original bill in the Senate Health Committee.
But it's a great start for pharmacists, so I'm thankful for it.
And like I say, I have communicated already at your direction to each of the sponsors of this bill that the board is supportive of the effort and remains available at any time to provide any input, education, or suggestion that any of those folks would like. And since it's going over to the House, Representative Sasser, I'm sure, will play a significant role in the progress of this bill through the House. So, I am clear on what you all want and your support. So I don't feel that I need additional guidance. I know what you guys want me to do. I've contacted about this bill, but wanted to make sure if there was anything different or additional to get that now before this thing starts moving through the House.
I will say that I had my first incident. It's been a while, I should say, not my first, but it's been a while, with an officer last night in the pharmacy who had to do the post-exposure prophylaxis. And we will certainly need some guidance on that, because it brought me back to my HIV days, and it was extremely difficult to navigate through all the new agents. So, I mean, I think that's great that we're able to do that, but we will need some guidance on what agents we need to use, because it is quite overwhelming. I had to work with an ER doc on that last night, and the insurance on that. So that was kind of overwhelming for me. But I think if we have some sort of protocol for that, that would be great, because that one threw me.
Sounds like to me, Ashley, that if this bill is passed in its current form, or at least that provision remains in whatever form that emerges, we might have an opportunity as a board, as we've done in some other things. I don't recall that we would be required to pass protocols for this, but apart from the protocol, Ashley, there might be a real opportunity for the board to consider sponsorship of some educational resources and materials.
Absolutely. I think it would be easy to do that. I just think that that might be something that pharmacists will need some guidance on, that we can certainly provide.
Yep. Any other guidance for me in my community? I'm not hearing any. I think we're all clear. The board is supportive. A little bit disappointing that the bill's been narrowed down as much as it has, but as I interpret my instructions the board continues to be supportive of the effort and ready, willing, and able to provide any and all input requested, either in the substance of the proposed legislation or the means of its implementation. Bill, that's all I've got on that one, unless there's anything else we need to talk about on 575.
I think everybody's had the opportunity to ask. Please proceed.
All right. The next bill and the next two that I want to talk about, well, actually the next three really don't impact the Board of Pharmacy all that directly, if they impact us at all, but just an update. H178, I think you all, again, you should be familiar with it from our prior discussions. It would require the implementation of a system whereby there would be real-time access to information to determine eligibility and cost information for prescription drugs. That bill did pass the House on May 11th. It extended, I think the only change in the version that came out of the House was to extend the implementation deadline to January 1st, 2023. I confess that what I know about the technological requirements for implementation is vanishing to the point of nothingness. I do understand that implementation technologically is going to be a challenge, but that's the only update on that one. Again, it doesn't impact us, but does impact pharmacy. H395, which is mandating participation and enforcement in the, among other things, for pharmacies into the HIE network. That has come out of the House with the deadline for pharmacies to connect to the state HIE network extended also to January 1st, 2023. I can't remember what the deadline was prior. I think it was June 1st, 2022, but the only change in it is that. And then finally, of the ones in which there was quick action, H683, Representative Sasser is the primary sponsor on this, is a bill that would require all pharmacies to provide patients with written materials on appropriate controlled drug disposal, and require all pharmacies to maintain at least one on-site method for controlled drug disposal. That was introduced in very late April, referred to the House Health Committee. It came out of the Health Committee on May 11th without change and passed the full House. It has been sent over to the Senate. So that obviously would require a fair bit of implementation by individual pharmacies. It does not require any rulemaking by the board.
Jay, I do have a question about this that I don't know if it's something you could communicate to Representative Sasser. Is this going to be at the disposal boxes? I mean, at present, pharmacies generally have to pay for those.
Right.
To pay to have those in their pharmacy. So that's
right.
going to be legislation that's going to possibly put an undue burden on a lot of pharmacies, cost wise, because generally what happens.
It would also, Keith, I think require. I think if you have on-site disposal, you also have to obtain a modification to your DEA registration. I don't think that has a monetary cost, but
now that part's easy.
Okay.
We did that, but what we tend to see is people bringing in boxes and boxes of drugs from mail order, and we have to absorb the cost of disposing of those drugs. We're glad to get them out of people's medicine cabinets, but there's got to be a fine line there. So I don't know how that can be communicated, if that's our place to communicate it, but just my interjection there. I think it's a great idea, but we need some funding for it.
Keith, give us an idea of what kind of cost you're talking about. Is it in the hundreds per year or thousands per year?
Depending on how much you dispose of, it can go into the thousands.
Do you pay by the pound?
No, they usually will send you the one we use. Actually, you may be able to help me on this, but they'll usually send you X number of boxes, maybe I think 7 or 10. But it's up in the high hundreds to get that, to buy that bundle. Yeah, that does cover shipping and everything on the, to send it back. But that's an expense that, people who are operating on razor thin margins don't really necessarily need to bear all of it if it's going to be required.
And plus, there's administrative cost to that too. There's time involved in that, and there's safety involved in that too. So that needs to be, that's calculated in there as well.
How secure are they from a controlled substances disposal standpoint, or preventing diversion, I should say? Is it an opportunity to create a diversion?
I think anybody looking for an opportunity to divert is going to find a way to divert, no matter how it is. But and I can only use our system as an example, the pharmacist has access to only a pharmacist has access to the keys, and generally 2 people are assisting, with securing the box, once it's full. Really, just from a matter, it usually takes 2 people to do it because we try to pack it as tight as we can to get, before we ship it. So, but there is an opportunity there.
Okay, so it's a metal locked cabinet, basically,
Yeah,
like a
bolted
mailbox
to the
sort of?
floor.
Yeah, but I do think more access to that encourages folks that may have unused, especially narcotics. It's a way for them to get rid of those and not keep those around in their medicine cabinet for people to use. So I think access to those kinds of things is going to help with some of the diversion and getting it out of people's, expired meds and things that don't need. Somebody has a prescription for oxycodone that they're not taking for a knee replacement. It gets it out of their medicine cabinet.
Absolutely. It's a great thing.
I wanted Keith just to circle back on that. What the bill what it says specifically, that all pharmacies would be required to make available on site for purchase or at no cost to the patient at least one consumer method for individuals to dispose of unwanted or expired prescription drugs, including over-the-counter at-home drug disposal products, or secured medication collection kiosk or boxes subject to the following requirements. And so, Keith, it gives an option there that it is not a mandate that you have an on-site disposal play, but you have to either have that or you have to provide, and you could charge a patient to it, some sort of at-home disposal product. So
that's fair enough.
So there's been some sensitivity, obviously, to the cost aspects of that.
And they make I've looked into it before, but they make almost like boxed kits that someone can purchase and go home and destroy their medications that way. So I guess that's what that's referring to, Jay.
Yes, I think that's right, Ashley. And again, as I interpret the current bill, it does say for purchase or at no cost to the patient. As I interpret that, if a pharmacy decided that their method of compliance would be that I will have available for purchase some at-home method of disposal, if a patient said, well, I decline to purchase that, you're not required to give it to them. So the only thing that I read in this, a bill that is required to be provided to the patient without charge, is written informational materials concerning how to properly dispose of medications, and sort of here's why you need to do that. And in fact, Ashley, you and I had some involvement with this. Obviously, I don't see any reason why, if this passed, that we at the board couldn't take a run at coming up with a leaflet or other appropriate reference that pharmacies could download and use without charge, except their cost of printing it, of course.
So this has to be printed? Is there not what way to make this available in a electronic form?
It says written informational materials, Keith. I know that from time to time we get into I generally take the position that written can include an electronic format, but I would be happy to reach out on this and say, I mean, what I'm hearing, and I'm not trying to pretermit the discussion, of course, but what I'm hearing is that the board is supportive of the public health and safety policy behind this, which is providing additional means for patients to get rid of controlled drugs in a safe manner to prevent their diversion. Would like to remind the sponsors to be cognizant of the potential costs, but I would say perhaps Keith saying that the board does note that the options that are presented to pharmacies do appear to be sensitive to those issues, and could also say we would like to have some clarification as to whether providing patients who wish to get it the required written material electronically, would that be deemed to satisfy that requirement? I'd be happy to communicate those things.
I think that would be great, and because just from a practicality standpoint, most people don't want paper anymore.
Right.
And number two, you can provide a lot more information if you have like we have QR codes on our labels now for our patient information, and we provide printed information on request, but the information provided on the QR code is infinitely more useful than the old printed monograph that we used to give out for every for every new prescription.
And as you know, Keith, this board has always said that in terms of providing written drug information to a patient, has always said if that's if a patient would prefer to receive that electronically, as long as the information gets to the patient, this board has always said that satisfies those requirements. I'd certainly be happy to raise that as a point of clarification on that. And communicate those things. I agree, Keith. That's a very practical and useful point that ought to be considered.
Thank you. Yeah, please do.
I think some clarification as to which pharmacies this would apply to. Would it apply to a hospital pharmacy or a limited service permit type pharmacy, or is it just those open to the public?
Right. Yeah, what it says is it says that each pharmacy that dispenses a controlled substance to a patient, but I agree with you, Bill. A hospital pharmacy dispenses controlled substances to its inpatients. And is this intended to cover that as well? I'll be happy to ask for some clarification in consideration of that. I could even, if y'all thought it would be an appropriate thing to do, to analogize to the fact that to the ID statute, that it exempts ID requirements, for example, for inpatients and some other pharmacies of that type. Out of decision, that it really make a lot of sense if you're dispensing a Schedule II controlled substance to an inpatient, that you require them to give an ID before they do that. Sort of that maybe the same would apply here if you're dispensing a controlled substance to an inpatient. Do you really need to hand them written materials?
On the other hand,
to ask for that clarification, Bill.
On the other hand, a PA nurse practitioner dispensing phentermine,
correct,
should be able to have a method to properly dispose of unused phentermine if that were ever to happen.
Yep.
Which is about as likely as you and I walking on Mars.
I'd be happy to raise that and suggest some clarification on that. I think the way we'd present it, Bill, would be obviously, as it stands today, a PA or an NP would be dispensing from a pharmacy. So that would clearly be covered. But what about a dispensing physician, for example? They should, I think that the requirement should apply equally.
I think we just heard a vote from my dog. Good for the goose, good for the gander.
I think that's a clarification point well worth raising, Bill. I feel clear on these unless y'all got anything else on them.
I had a clarification question on H395. HIE, is that Health Information Exchange?
Correct.
Okay.
And that I pretty much just exhausted my knowledge of that topic by confirming the meaning of the acronym.
So I wanted to bring something up. If you're at the end of the legislative report, are you at the end of the legislative report?
No, I want to go back, Andy, and pick up just sort of a table reset on the other bills that we're following that didn't have any action on them.
Okay, yeah, go. I'll hold my comment.
Sure. I am at the end of the ones that were in the supplemental memo, but let me go back and pick up the others, unless there are any further questions, obviously, on any of these. But am I right that my instructions for H96 and H683 are to send letters to the sponsors of those expressing the points that we've expressed here today? I'm not seeing any. Okay, I'm clear on that. Let me go back then. So now I'm in the main legislative report. I'm gonna skip the long-acting injectable. We all obviously have talked about that plenty. First, an apology. H93, which has passed the House. I did not have on the prior legislative updates. I don't have any excuse for that other than it just fell through. Through my cracks. Maybe that's not a great way to put it. That I just missed it as I was going along. But H93 is the bill that would require opioid antagonist education with opioid prescriptions. You see, I've summarized that for you. This bill, which has passed the House, and it passed the House on April 29th, and it's been referred to Senate rules. It would require a prescriber who prescribes to a patient 50 or more MMEs of morphine per day, or prescribes an opioid and a benzodiazepine concurrently, or a patient that meets certain risk factors for overdose. The prescriber would be required to specifically provide education on opioid antagonist use to such patients. The practitioner would then be required, after offering that information, to offer a prescription for an opioid antagonist to that patient. Now that's the prescriber side of things. On the pharmacy side of on the pharmacist side of things, this bill would say that a pharmacist who's dispensing a Schedule II opioid to a patient meeting those same criteria above would be required to ask the patient whether he or she has a prescription for an opioid antagonist and offer to fill it if that individual does, and I guess advise that an individual meeting those criteria that there is a state standing order that allows a pharmacist to dispense an opioid antagonist and offer to do that for the patient as well. And then there's certain communication requirements. So again, from the pharmacy side, if a patient came in and met those criteria, the pharmacist would be required to ask, do you have an opioid antagonist prescription? If you do, I'm certainly happy to fill that. If you don't, there is a state standing order, and I could provide this to you if you like. There's nothing in this bill that would require, for example, if a prescriber does issue an opioid antagonist prescription, there's no requirement that that prescription indicate that the patient meets any of those criteria. I think this is a little bit of the challenge here for pharmacists is knowing which patients you're required to make this offer. I think patient walks in with a prescription for an opioid and a benzodiazepine at the same time. That's not hard to figure out. Probably, but y'all would know a lot better than me. How hard is it to figure out whether someone has been prescribed 50 or more MMEs of morphine?
That's not hard at all. That's not hard at all. And I'll tell you what my policy is at my store. If somebody walks in and this is the case already, I have a conversation with them that says, I will not fill your narcotic unless you have this on hand. And I've given you training on how to use it. So, I mean, personally, I don't know, maybe I think this is easy to do because I think we should be doing this anyway. Yeah, but the 50 MME, that is if you go into the, Keith, help me out.
PMP?
PMP, you're able to see that identification there of what that is. So that's easy to find and easy to track. And I mean, right now, a lot of the opioid and benzodiazepines, there's certain insurance criteria that you have to have in place for that anyway. So those patients are very easy to identify. And I think that conversation needs to be had with every patient. And that's not a hard conversation. And most of the time, your prescriber is going to get on board with that. That's just my 2 cents.
This is so
much
helpful.
pushback
Ashley,
do you
because as a
have?
non-practitioner, I didn't know how to assess the difficulty of compliance with that. Thank you.
Ashley, how much pushback do you have from patients? I mean, as far as like, well, I really don't want her. It's not going to happen to me.
Well,
I mean,
if you tell them that I'm not going to fill your narcotics without it, and this is my policy, then generally speaking, they don't push back. Sorry. I mean, maybe I'm too tough, but I mean, really, that's a conversation that I have, and maybe again, maybe I'm too tough, but you know, generally speaking, that's my comfort level. If I'm going to fill your narcotics, then I need to know that you have this and you know how to use it. Yeah. And most people are okay with that. And if they're not okay, then that's their choice and they can go to another drugstore. So that's how I feel. Again, my personal opinion only.
Look at you, Ashley. You're complying with a statute that hasn't even been passed yet.
she's trailblazer.
That's right.
Some people may not feel that way, and that is a hard discussion. So I will say that is a very difficult discussion to have with patients because a lot of them are hesitant and think that you're accusing them. You know, Keith, I know that's what you're probably alluding to. They immediately accuse you of thinking that they're going to overdose and that they're an addict, right? So that's a difficult conversation to have, but a necessary one.
No, but I admire how you approach it. I really do. I mean, I think that's really a great way to do it. So the only issue that I can see that will be a rate limiting step for some folks is the cost of their copay. I mean, because you know, Narcan, depending on your insurance, can be pretty steep.
I will say that that's gotten a lot better more recently, where a lot of insurances are covering that for a much cheaper copay. So that's good news on that front, because it used to be ridiculously expensive and it would be a much higher copay. But now it looks like for a lot of insurances, it's covered at a cheaper copay. So that's the good news on that front. Yeah. That's what I'm seeing anyway.
Well, I commend you, Ashley. I think it's great. I mean, if you save one life out of the whole thing, it's absolutely worth it.
So I'm not hearing then with Ashley with that extremely helpful, at least to me, and I'm sure to others, description that determining whether a patient would fall into the categories that would trigger under this statute the need to have that discussion, practically speaking, isn't a difficult thing to figure out. Your sense that just you know, again, it's already passed the House, just sort of leave it be and watch and see how it progresses through the legislature.
Yeah, and again, it looks like it's just that we're required to provide education. Again, I think I go an extra step there, but it looks like it's just providing education. And
education and the offer the offer, right? All right, unless there's different direction, I think we're good to just continue monitoring that one as it goes through the legislature. I do think if it passes, that's another opportunity, Ashley, for us to maybe develop some helpful materials for pharmacists in this.
Jay, here's an example. Fentanyl, 25 micrograms an hour, has an MME of 60 per day. And that's using an online calculator.
Right.
So it's not a very high bar. But it's
super helpful to me. All right. Well, I think that's helpful. I will continue monitoring and update y'all on that. Run through the others. H-29, verification of immigration status. That never got a committee hearing. Clint, as far as I can tell, that one was subject to the crossover deadline. It was not among the exceptions. So that one is probably dead for the remainder of the session.
Yeah, some of them arise zombie-like, but it is
Right.
not subject to the normal rules.
H178, H395, we've already talked about. S257, again, not a Board of Pharmacy issue, but that is the statute that would create in the Department of Insurance a fairly comprehensive licensing and regulatory scheme for pharmacy benefit managers. There's been no change. That bill remains, I'm sorry, it was reported favorably out of the Senate Healthcare Committee. It's now gone to the Committee on Commerce and Insurance, and it's still sitting there. It was not voted on, obviously, by the Senate prior to the deadline, but it is not subject to the crossover deadline because it has a fee provision in it, and bills with a fee provision are not subject to the crossover deadline. So that bill is still alive and moving through the Senate under normal procedure. S345, I think I updated you guys in May. I'm sorry, in April. That's the one that deals with the changes to physician assistant dispensing. And I initially, the reports I had gotten were that there had been no intent to change that, and they would make some quick attempts to rectify that, and I provided some suggested language to do that. As with so many things over in the legislature, whether it was intentional or unintentional, the representations that were made to me on that turned out not to be accurate. And in fact, the medical society particularly is pushing for making dispensing PAs the equivalent of dispensing physicians, which means that we would register them as we do a dispensing physician, but as you all know, we don't have any authority to take any action. So there was a significant amount of discussion about that among me, some MedSoc folks. I see you, Clint. I'll come back to you in just a second. MedSoc folks, PA Society, and Representative Sasser. Representative Sasser indicates to me that they ran it through the Senate so it could make crossover deadline, but there will be significant further discussion and negotiation throughout the House process, and our concerns have been communicated clearly, and I'm in touch, so that's where we are on that. Clint, sorry.
No, I was just thoughtlessly sitting here typing some follow-up emails to things we're discussing with my hand on my head.
Okay.
I'm not raising my hand.
All right, you did not bid on the item up for auction at the moment. So I will continue, absent contrary instruction from you all today, to remain engaged in the PA bill. In general, the PA bill is to make it so that physician assistants can practice with less onerous oversight by supervising physicians, which I think probably most of us on this call, or maybe all of us on this call, would agree is probably a good thing in many ways. The dispensing piece is one that I do think needs some further discussion and polishing.
I agree. That is concerning.
I will keep y'all posted, obviously, as we move through the House process on that. Other things, S373, that was a potential relatively minor expansion of the voluntary healthcare services statute. That never got a committee hearing, so it did not, a committee hearing, much less a hearing in the Senate. So that one did not survive crossover. Same with S515, that was the Conscience Protection Act. S545, the Universal Licensure Recognition Act. Recall the concern we had on that one was making sure it was real clear that bill would not interfere with our existing reciprocity, national reciprocity process for pharmacy licensure. That one never came out of Senate rules, so it did not survive crossover. Some newer ones, H862, that is the expansion of collaborative practice authority. Representative Sasser introduced that bill last session. He has reintroduced it. It was not subject to the crossover deadline because it contains a fee provision. When it was introduced last legislative session, you directed me to write a letter to the sponsor stating the board's support for appropriate expansion of the ability of pharmacists to enter into collaborative practice agreements. My question for y'all today is, would you like me to do the same with this time around? The silence is deafening.
I know. Alice, Ashley, what do you think? Keith, Andy?
Yes.
Up or down? Apparently there's some concern.
I will say that this bill is identical in all material respects to the one that was introduced previously. The format of that are amendments to the clinical pharmacist practitioner provision, but what it really does is open up the ability for pharmacists who are not clinical pharmacist practitioners, as that is defined today, to enter into collaborative practice arrangements with physicians. This is, again, a principal NCAP advocacy priority and is one that the board did indicate support for last session.
I don't see, I'm not sure I really completely understand what these expanded things would be specifically, or examples or whatever, and not looking for that right now. But I don't think that I would be in favor of, being, especially if we were being supported, that we were supportive last time it went through. I think it's worthy of being supported.
Is this, I mean, just to clarify a little bit further, this would be like, say for, for a practical example, we could enter into a collaborative practice agreement. If a patient came in and we did like a rapid strep or a rapid flu on the patient, we could have a protocol where we could prescribe, an antibiotic or a Tamiflu, if needed. Am I off base there?
No, Keith, that would be one potential use of broader collaborative practice authority, and it would allow pharmacists who do not meet the current eligibility criteria to be a clinical pharmacist practitioner to enter into that. Now, as is true of clinical pharmacist practitioners agreements, it would be an agreement with an individual physician or physicians, as it would be, and you would only be able to provide those services for patients of those physicians. But notwithstanding that clarification, yes, Keith, what you just described, and recall that as S575 was originally introduced, it provided sort of an potential independent authority to do that. If collaborative practice were expanded, there would be an avenue for doing that sort of thing through this pathway.
And I'm also wondering too, I know that Community Care of North Carolina, they're really trying to get pharmacists and physicians' office connected in order to do some, like, have pharmacists in their physician's office and help with patients. So I'm wondering if, to me, that's a great idea, because that just, I don't know, I think it puts pharmacists in the doctor's offices with patients, and I think that's a great idea. So it sounds like to me that on multiple fronts that this will get pharmacists more involved in patient care, which is the direction we want to go in. So I think it's a great idea.
So I think what I'm hearing is send a letter to the sponsors substantially similar to the one we sent when this was last introduced, and make clear that we're supportive of the idea and ready to assist in any way we can.
Of course, the devil's in the details, but I think anytime we can get at the place where decisions are being made about medication therapy, we're going to be much more effective. than having to follow up after the decision's already made.
I agree.
I call it at the bedside, wherever the bedside may be.
I'm clear on that, unless there is any further direction on it. It's very, very helpful. All right, sorry, y'all. I'm scrolling down to get back. H683, we've already discussed. That was drug disposal. H896, that was a new bill that was introduced, would require health plans to reimburse pharmacists at the same rate that another healthcare provider is reimbursed for providing the same or an equivalent service. Not a board of pharmacy issue, obviously, but just making you aware of that. That was filed on May 5th and nothing happened with it. So I think that one probably also did not survive crossover, Clint, unless there's some crossover exception that I'm not applying here. And Clint's giving me a vigorous shake of the head. H817 and H691, I want to talk about those together. Those are both individual, those are provision, they cover things that are in S575, took them out individually. H817 was for self-administered hormonal contraceptives. H691, again, to administer controlled substances for PrEP. It's got the same drafting goof in it. Those were individual pieces of things that came into 575. Obviously, they were not voted. Neither of those was voted on by the House prior to crossover. So I think they're probably dead. But again, those issues are central to S575, which is still allowable. So there's nothing separate that we need to do on those. And then finally, a late bill introduced, End of Life Option Act. This was a bill that would codify the ability of patients in an end of life situation to go through a process whereby they could acquire a drug to end their life. There were requirements both for prescribers and for pharmacists about that. That was introduced in the House very late. It was either very late. No, it was early May. It was introduced in early May, referred to the House Committee on Rules and didn't emerge from that. So I think it too did not survive crossover on that. So for all of these that I just described that did not survive crossover, Clint is right to remember that there are parliamentary means by which the substance of any of these could be introduced later in the session, but as Clint pointed out, they're not subject to the regular process. So I will, of course, continue to monitor all of them substantively, not just the name of the bill, and update you. But my takeaway is that I've got good and clear direction to send letters regarding H96, administration of injectables, H683, drug disposal, and H862, collaborative practice expansion. And I'm very clear on what to say about those. So, Andy, that now I have finished, unless there are further questions on it.
You're muted.
I don't know where it properly fits today in the agenda, but I'll throw it in now. In your conversations with Wayne Sasser, do he and others that may be in a position to do something about it, are they aware of the discussion we had maybe in a committee meeting recently about this coming fall and tech immunization qualifications as it relates to the PrEP Act and the big gaping hole that currently exists in every state that are not, there's 4 states that have already immunization by technicians. They were ahead of the game, started with Idaho. but basically 48 other states are going to deal with technicians that are capable of giving vaccine per the PrEP Act, but they can't help with annual flu vaccines, and they can't help with pneumonia vaccines and Shingrix and all the things. And so this is creeping up on us. And so my question is there something state by state that we can do as an emergency rule from a legislative perspective to help fill that gap for this coming flu season?
So, Andy, as to are they aware? Yes, that was specifically and clearly communicated to the sponsors of S575 and to Representative Sasser about all of those issues you just described. And I haven't looked at the census, but I suspect we're well north of 1,000 pharmacy technicians who are qualified under the PrEP Act to administer vaccines. And so, yes, all of those things have been communicated quite clearly, and there was some hope that that might get incorporated into S575 or another bill. It does not seem to be getting any traction. I'm sort of open to your suggestion, of course, about that. One thing I could do, if you wanted, is send another letter to Representative Sasser about this particular issue, since S575 is now sitting in the House, and reiterate some concerns and suggestions about that. I am more than happy to do that at your direction.
I mean, I would love to hear other people's thoughts on it, but I think about my time in community pharmacy, and I'm not practicing now, but my time in a busy, just call it a chain drugstore with a high volume, where I've got folks that have been trained up to help me as pharmacy technicians, as immunizers, and I am just imagining a scenario in flu shot season where it is a workflow nightmare. Because we've got techs that they're perfectly capable of giving immunizations, but they're limited to COVID vaccines and other vaccines between ages 3 and 18. I'm telling you something you already know, but I can just imagine what a nightmare that could be for operators, not only in our state, but across the country.
I agree with you, Andy. If you can give a COVID vaccine, you should be able to give a flu shot as well. And certainly in the nature of cutting down on med errors, getting a technician to help with that would be a great asset in the fall when flu shots are coming. So I agree with you.
I want to think out loud a little bit here. I mean, just sort of while I'm trying to process it all. I don't have any objection. I think they should be able to do it. But one of the bigger things that when we did the rules about, that broadened some tech responsibilities within institutions, that everybody wants to refer to it with the language tech, check tech kind of thing, which I think is so narrow in scope. And I've always, in true confession, I've always hated that terminology because I always said we should be looking at it as enhanced roles for technicians. And, I'm all for doing this kind of thing of expanding roles for technicians. And this seems like thinking out loud, haven't processed it all in my own mind, but that this is an enhanced role for a technician, so it's not a blanket thing for every technician. And in our focus instead of maybe should be at those places where you give an enhanced some enhanced ability to technicians to do functions, which this is, to me, is a prime example of one that's just not a blanket thing to technicians. To me, it increases the value to the process that technicians can bring, if I'm making any sense.
Andy, I just wanted real quickly before it flies out of my mind, I did want to say in terms of emergency, this or the other, this is, as long as the federal public health emergency has been declared, and Clint, I think where we sit is right now, it's declared through the end of 2023, I think.
October 2024 is when the PrEP Act expires, if not sooner terminated.
So as long as that is in place, technicians will be able to administer the vaccines that the PrEP Act authorizes them. And you've correctly pointed out where some of the holes in that are, but absent legislation to grant that authority and under what conditions to technicians, we can't do that by rulemaking, emergency or otherwise. It would require a statutory change. So Wallace, I'm sorry, that's not directly germane to your comments, but I wanted to circle back to Andy. And again, that you at your direction, this is very clearly communicated, both the gaps and the need. But I am more than happy to reiterate that as sort of a standalone issue in a letter to, and I think it would appropriately and perhaps most effectively be one that would go to Representative Sasser, since 575 is now in the House.
I mean, and I may have said something wrong there. I do understand that it would take legislative and there's nothing we can do as a board. Is it something where, because I would suspect that retail merchants would see this as a concern heading into the fall. I would think that this is not going to be unique just to our group seeing the problem that could arise. I guess we make an answer to it or make a comment to it independently and let others jump on board. But I just want to make sure people are thinking about what we're headed toward. And then I didn't even mention the other piece that we know might come, and that is COVID boosters. And so when you talk about all the things that we're going to be juggling in the fall and headed into the winter, I'm just concerned. And I think I don't need to say that again, but no, I think something to Mr. Sasser would be appropriate.
I'm clear on that and happy to do it if that's the consensus of the members.
Now I am raising my hand instead of just scratching my head. Given the crossover deadline, unless we have a bathroom bill style gut and replace or addition to the 575 after the fact, we're going to have somebody willing to insert it somewhere since the barn door is closed.
Yeah. Let me suggest this. When I sent our letter on that, I CC'd some folks. I CC'd the association, some others. Andy, to your point, I would be happy if you guys would want me to write this letter expressing this, or reminding, I think would be the right way to describe it, of this issue. I would certainly be happy to copy that letter to some of the organizations that we know are active over in the legislature, because I do think for what it's worth, I agree with you, Andy, that this is an issue that I think there are a number of organizations that are likely to have some interest in this.
Yes.
What I don't know and don't have any way to know is whether this issue was discussed and it was dropped, as part of some compromise on something else, but that's not a reason not to remind folks about it.
Thank you, Jay.
Is that the end of the discussion on legislative matters?
From my standpoint, it is, and I appreciate the terrific feedback and instruction on the communications. Y'all make it very easy for me on that.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for your leadership in this area and the in-depth reporting.
You're welcome.
I don't know how we would reasonably get this information otherwise.
I'm happy to do it, and I must say that Mr. Pinion is as invaluable here as he is in all other things, helping me stay on target with this. So it's a team effort.
thanks also to Mr. Pinion for his contributions.
I
It's
am
definitely-
completely invaluable in the sense of being not valuable. But I always am happy to affirm that Jay knows what he's talking about.
Whether he does or doesn't, right?
No, Clint. will
Part of the
tell-
job. Part of the job.
It is a lot of information to sift through, and I echo Bill's comments.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Yep, you're more than welcome. Happy to do it.
Okay, are
Mr.
we
President,
ready?
the remaining issues are just sort of our standard reports, consent agenda. We do have a closed session that will need to go in for potential summary suspensions and for a personnel matter. I just raised that to see what y'all's appetite, what your appetite is. We can, if anybody needs a break, or we can continue through the remainder of the regular business and take a break prior to the closed session, whatever you would like to do. I think Michelle is indicating that a break now this might be the appropriate time.
Well, let's certainly take it then and reconvene. I've got 12:17, so how about if we get back together at 12:25? Is that enough time?
Sounds
Very
good.
good.
Michelle gives the thumbs up. All right.
All right,
We'll see you in
12:25.
8 minutes. Bill, are you doing any more woodwork these days?
So you talking to me?
Yep. Yeah.
Every time I have a chance, which is most days. Yeah, I'm spending a lot of time out there. It's really nice. The best thing for me about COVID is it's taken me off the road. And the main thing that was putting me on the road were doing accreditations, excuse me, accreditation surveys for John Pritchett.
Mm-hmm.
And they're doing all those virtually now. Yeah, I wasn't willing to do that. So basically I'm not doing any work to speak of. A little bit of compliance type consulting. I got hooked into that through Yates up in Rhode Island.
Right.
A couple of physician offices that are dispensing, well, they're compounding IV therapy products in their office and administering them. And Rhode Island Department of Health decided they needed to follow USP standards. Mm-hmm. So they needed a consultant and they required monthly or quarterly compliance meetings. So I'm doing that for 2 different offices up there. That's all I'm doing.
Do you go to Providence, Bill? Is that where you're going up there?
When I go, yeah. But I haven't been there since. Actually, I think the airport's in Warwick.
Yeah, it is. TF Green's in Warwick.
But it's right across the river from Providence.
I lived in Providence for a year. That's why.
Did you?
Yeah. I did my my judicial clerkship after law school was with a judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeals, and that court's based in Boston, of course, but Judge Selya's chambers are in Providence. So Amy and I lived in Wayland Square, which is a little neighborhood that's immediately adjacent to Brown's campus on the east side of town. So in the mornings, I would get up and I would walk down the hill to downtown to Kennedy Plaza, where the federal courthouse was, and work there. And then the afternoons, I would walk back up the hill to go through. And so I'd walk through the Rhode Island School of Design and Brown University campuses every day. But we had a great time in Providence.
How was the weather?
It was pretty mild. I mean, they're not, Rhode Island tends not to be, I think it has something to do with its proximity to the ocean and some particular current, but its winters tend not to be as biting as they are even in Boston around there. So that's pretty mild.
Neat.
It's an interesting town, and there's a lot of history and a lot of colorful history, let's say.
Yeah.
Up front.
It's given me a whole new perspective on the Northeast.
Well, when I know we're about to get back started here, but I was up there in 97 to 98, and the town had sort of was coming on the back end of having been transformed from sort of a completely decaying New England manufacturing town into one that was more service industry oriented, and sort of the downtown was coming back. So it was a fun time to be up there as that transition was toward the end, but was still going on. It was pretty neat. They did a great job saving the downtown of that city.
Very good. Great. Well,
I'm showing. I'm showing time here to get back started. I think make sure Wallace is back.
There he is.
There he is.
He was scouting for fish out there.
That's right. Wallace, were you checking those cypress knees to see if they were ready to be harvested and carved into Christmas ornaments?
And that's what I need to do, is cut one of those things off and send it to you and say carve something.
Yeah, I've done a cypress knee before. It's a different type of carving, but it's fun.
I bet so. I mean, it's really beautiful wood.
Mm-hmm. All right, Mr. President,
Okay.
I think we are ready. And the first report we'll have, well, first let me back up. Before JP, of course, is going to give us the April financial report. The Budget Committee, which is still Michelle and Ashley, will be, JP and Rhonda and I'll be reaching out to you to have a session to go over the proposed budget for fiscal year 2021-22, which we will present the proposal at the June meeting. So we'll be in touch with y'all to set that up. With that then, Bill, I'll turn it over to JP to give you the update.
Great. Thanks. Hey, JP.
Good morning, everyone. Or afternoon, I guess now. Everybody hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Not much to report. The end of April, we're still sort of experiencing what we've experienced all year long, was a surplus in revenues. We didn't see the downturn that we thought might be coming with COVID. And then on the flip side, we did see the restricted operating activities. So we kind of had more revenues and less expenses than expected. Which is great because as it says in the memo there, that allowed us to do some great things. We increased the Haywood Fund principal, as you all know, by $250K that was sent. We did the COVID vaccination CE through Campbell University, and we've paid for the majority of that at this point. We were also able to get rid of our oldest fleet vehicle this last month as well and get a new car. So that should last us some years ahead. So other than that, everything is, like I said, on track. More revenues than expected, lower expenses than expected. Everything's trucking along to the end of the fiscal year, which, as you all know, is coming up at the end of June. So that's it from my end, unless anyone's got any questions. And as always, I am happy to delve into the weeds and discuss minutia. Also happy to do these 10,000 foot views of everything. So,
Any question from board
I
members?
think Michelle was raising her hand.
I am raising my hand. Okay, so I'm still stuck. This has nothing to do with your financial report, but I think you're the person who's responsible for helping us to understand how we fill out expense reports. What do we put for, as we're doing committee meetings, what do we put? How is that coded?
yeah, that's a great
Did I miss
question,
that?
Michelle. And I can send out the per diem document that I sent to you just as a reminder. The written policy that we instated years ago, as Jay can attest, anything less than 2 hours is a $25 per diem. 2 hours to 4 hours is 50, and anything greater than 4 hours is 100. During COVID, we have been doing a normal board meeting per diem of $100, a full day per diem. And I kind of leave it to you all to discern how much time and you're devoting to each of these things. If the call is only 10 minutes, but it was 4 hours of preparation, obviously, I think you should take that sort of thing into consideration. Does that help at all, Michelle, or is that even more confusing?
I don't know why I missed that 2 hours, less than 2 hours, $25. I don't know where I missed that, but I clearly did. Thank you.
Sure, no worries.
We got it, Michelle, and we'll get it back to you on that.
Okay. Bless you, Ashley.
And
All
like
right.
I say,
Yeah, if there's
Michelle and Ashley, Rhonda and JP and I will get in touch with you with a couple of dates and times to get rounded up for the review. And Rhonda and JP have already done their usual excellent work on preparing that, so we're in very good shape going forward on that. Anything else for JP?
Thank you, JP.
All right, thank you all.
Thank you, sir. JK, I think my notes say you're up for the investigative report.
I am up this month. How's everybody? If you look behind your tab for the number of cases that we've had since January 1 up through May 10, we're at 126. AOC charges leading the pack. COVID year really didn't throw a wrench into that one. Procedural legal cases following up with 32. Then we got errors with 29. And then our inspection follow-ups are 21. Low number of diversions, which has been nice, at 5. And then just, almost a handful of substance abuse cases for this period at 4. For the surrenders, we're still holding at 8 since January 1. We've got 5 techs and 3 pharmacists. Our field folks have pretty much resumed normal field operations. Of course, we tell them, still do what you're comfortable with out in the field. If you obviously still, wear your mask if you want to, and, try to get as much paperwork sent to you prior to an inspection or anything like that. But again, I know they were all chomping at the bit to get back out on the road. So again, we've pretty much resumed normal operations. We had a couple of pre-hearings yesterday. I want to thank Michelle for being the hearing officer. Hearings I thought went well. Kim presented some nice testimony for her case. And then I had presented for the case involving Mr. Zach Thomas. So, any questions?
I have one, Josh. If you could just
Yes,
please
sir.
explain how the errors come to the attention of the board. Is that primarily patient?
It is, yes.
Okay.
Those will primarily come to us via complaint. They will fill out our online complaint form the majority of the time. Sometimes it can come just as a straight email, to us or directly to Cindy. Or sometimes they'll even come in as a phone call. One of us will, take the call, me, Crystal, Cindy, or Ellen, and then just, advise the person, to, file the complaint.
Thank you for explaining that.
Yes, sir. Anything
Any
else?
Any other questions for Josh? Thank you, sir.
All righty. Thank you.
Members, before this is not specifically on the agenda, but Josh's discussion of field operations reminded me, in terms of resuming our in-person board meetings, I have a proposal what we'd like to do from a staff standpoint, and see if we're all in the same place. Our proposal would be that we resume in-person board meetings at the July 20th meeting. And we would resume those, of course, following all CDC protocols. Vaccinated doesn't have to be masked. Unvaccinated has to be masked and distanced. And set that up for the July 20th meeting. Now, you might rightly ask, well, why not June? Here's why staff would ask for not June. We scheduled some significant, there are sort of 3 reasons, well, really 2. We scheduled some significant construction projects here at the office, thinking that we weren't going to need to, that was not going to disrupt anything in May or June. So there are 2 projects underway. One is a refurbishment of the foyer. It's mostly replacement of the flooring, but the foyer right now is a concrete pad, and there's some access issues there while this is going on, and so we can't move people in and out. We expect that's going to be finished here in another couple of weeks, but as with all, you've all done construction projects before, and so you're sort of at the mercy of the contractor on that. We don't think there would be any problem with July, but June it might be closed. Second, also part of this, are some improvements that we're making to the office in terms of some plexiglass barriers for Lisa and some other things. And all of those things need to get completed. And we may still be in construction mode. And the June meeting, the third Tuesday in June, is an early third Tuesday. It's June 15th. So that's one issue. It's just the physical plant issue. Second, we have a return to office plan for the staff, and that is going to begin on June 1st with the return of the directors, and then each departmental director is going to start bringing their individual staff back on the timeline that makes sense for each individual department. Clearly, that's going to involve a fair bit of reconfiguring IT and processes and all the like. And if trying to get staff rolled back in with a construction project and meeting prep for an in-person meeting on June 15th, I think is just going to be a little tough for staff to manage. We feel very comfortable about meeting a July 20th or being fully ready for July 20th resumption of in-person meetings. So that would be our ask for the staff. I think originally we all thought it was probably going to be September before we could get back, but we feel comfortable that we can get us back started at the July meeting. So I wanted to put that out there and see if that meets with your expectations and approval. And if it does, we'll make sure we're calendaring everything accordingly.
Well, I would like to see us get back to face-to-face meetings as soon as possible, but I understand the constraints. About the rest of you?
With the CDC the current CDC guidelines, I mean, there's no reason why we can't, and I don't see the reason for a whole lot of reconfiguration if folks have been vaccinated, not wear a mask. Right.
Well, some of this, again, going back here, Keith, some of it said we got this construction thing that's underway.
Yeah.
I can't roll that back.
Yeah, the construction part I totally get. So I mean, I'm cool with July. I'm just saying, it's incumbent upon us to be an example there yet again of how to conduct ourselves, in this in the times that we're in. So and to go with the science that's presented to us, and if the CDC says if you've been vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask or really you can go on without life as usual, then I'm all for that. And if you haven't been vaccinated, be honorable and wear a mask.
Yeah.
I would have liked to have seen June, but I understand completely. But I do think July we definitely need to try to get back face to face in July.
I feel very confident about that, Wallace. Everything we need to get done here, we absolutely will be able to get done in plenty of time for July.
Well, so be it.
All right. We will make this, and obviously we continue to watch. I mean, if there were some change, some variant that gets turned loose on us, we'll figure it out from there. But I absolutely appreciate your support and indulgence on the staff side of this to make sure that we're best set up, not just for you all, but for any members of the public that may come. And we will start working on that in earnest and absolutely meet that July deadline. So thank you for that. Meeting recaps, NABP annual meeting. I think you all know I was up there. It was my last hurrah as a member of the executive committee. It was, as I told some others, going up to Chicago to be there to do my part of the virtual meeting was a heck of a lot better than sitting in this chair at this desk hosting it as I did last year. So I was glad to go up there and do that. Virtual meeting was still not what an NABP meeting is or needs to be. And for those of you, Michelle, I know you've never attended an NABP meeting. An in-person NABP meeting is like most such things. A lot of the value is the informal stuff and the fellowship and the discussion with peers. But we are all set to resume a normal NABP meeting next May. That will be in Phoenix, and more information obviously will come out about that over the coming months. But I said it in my sort of farewell address, and I want to reiterate it here specifically to each of you. And my service on NABP's executive committee was incredibly gratifying. And I feel great that I was able to do things for the public. And frankly, I think it helped make me a better executive director. But I couldn't have done any of that without the full support of the board. And good Lord, did I get that in spades for the entire time. So I look forward. I think it's time to look forward to some new folks on the NABP Executive Committee. I feel sure that I'll continue to be a contributor to NABP, but time to move on. I appreciated my opportunities that you all made possible. The other big thing is I sent out an email to everyone yesterday with a reminder that now President of NABP, Caroline Jurin, will be appointing folks to NABP's committees and task forces. So I sent y'all an email with a description of what those different committees and task forces are going to be. We need to have a letter in to NABP by June 4th stating which board members or board staff members, I'm talking to staff too, would like to serve on any of those task forces and committees. I am happy to send a letter on behalf of every member of the board or staff member who wishes to serve. So if you would think about if you'd like to do that, I absolutely encourage you to do it. All I'll need is your current resume, and just shoot me an email with your interest. And if there are specific task forces and committees you're more interested in than others, let me know that. Those preferences, I can tell you as a former president, are absolutely taken into account. They aren't determinative, but they are taken into account. So if there are specific committees and task forces you're interested in, let me know that, and I'll be happy to send a single letter with all of that to NABP by June 4th. So Michelle, I know you've never done an NABP committee, but it's good stuff, and it really sets the regulatory and advocacy agenda for NABP. So that was the summary of the annual meeting. Thank you all who did attend virtually. I would see you guys pop up in the chat rooms, and I know we texted some, but I appreciate you making the effort to be contributors to that meeting, and thank goodness that's going to be the last time we have to do it that way.
Bill, Jay and Bill, could I add something really quick?
Oh, sure.
Okay, so I had the pleasure of attending that meeting, and I know Wallace and Andy did as well. One of the non-business sessions was one of the just group discussion forums, and one of the bigger things that was brought up was the pharmacy workplace conditions. And I know that we have already formed a committee with that, but personally, I would just like to say that I think it's important, or it would be important for one of our board members to attend specifically that task force, because I think that may give us some insight as to where to go with our own committee. So I just would like to say, based off the whole convention itself, that I think that's a really important task force that we should join. And, I know, Bill, you had spoke up and said that you wanted to attend one. If that's not one that you're interested, I'm happy to do that. But I just thought I'd add that because there was a lot of discussion about that. And I think that work group would be very interesting, and it'll help us continue our work.
Have we identified members of our own workplace standards committee?
Yeah, it's Keith and Andy.
Thanks for that, Ashley.
Okay.
Sorry I was not able to attend. I was needing vaccines.
You're doing the good work out there.
So we we can only have one representative at NABP from the board for that committee, right?
Well, not specifically. I mean, it depends on how many express. I would say that as many of you who are interested in serving on NABP task forces and committees who want to should all put your name in. And even if multiple folks want to serve on that or any other, go ahead and make that known. The likelihood, Bill, of course, it depends on the response from all of the states. The likelihood is we'd only get one.
Right.
But it's not a rule. Not a rule.
Okay. So I would say between Keith, Andy, and Ashley, one of the three of you should be on that, or should submit for inclusion on that committee. So please email Jay.
Yeah.
The sooner the better. Copy me if you would.
Yep.
And take a look at those and the other NABP committee opportunities and make your wishes known.
Yes, indeed. And we can round back up if we need to maybe slot that in a particular way. We got plenty of time to do it. So
yeah, well,
let me know.
Yes. So that needs to happen before the June meeting.
Yep. District 3 annual meeting, just a reminder, that's coming up in October. I know Cindy is on the call. I think Cindy has been making hotel reservations for those who have indicated they wish to attend, and why would you not, in Hilton Head in October. But let Cindy know. She can help you with that, and Leslie as well. And Cindy, if you can, I mean, I think we're expecting to get the actual registration materials on that at the end of this month. Is that right?
We're hoping for mid-June to get those out.
So more detail about the program and the like coming up, but do, if you can, go ahead and mark your calendars for October 3rd through the 6th for NABP District 3 at lovely and easy to get to Hilton Head, South Carolina. With that, then, Bill, that would just leave consent agenda. I'm not sure we have anything on the consent agenda. So,
okay. Well, then that will conclude our regular meeting. And after this, we'll move into a closed session. So at this point, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the regular meeting.
just a quick, if I might, Bill, just very quickly,
Sure.
for those who are attending from the public, the board is going to go into a closed session now to discuss potential summary suspensions and a personnel matter. When the board resumes open session, it will only resume open session to adjourn. So there will be no further items discussed. So now, and let me pause, and Antoine's going to check to make sure we don't have any comments or questions from the public.
Let's get back out. But
yeah, there are no comments in standby.
Perfect. So with that, I'm sorry for the interruption, Bill. Somebody needs to tell Jason Smith to mute his, there he goes. With that, then, I'm sorry, Bill, now would be the appropriate time to entertain a motion to move into closed session.
Jay, thanks for those comments too.
Yeah, you're welcome.
For the public at large. Motion to adjourn the regular session.
Do we need to vote on the consent agenda?
We don't have anything, so.
Oh, it's not, there's nothing in there. Okay.
Nothing
Yeah.
about.
Okay.
Yeah, technically, Bill, this would be a motion to go into closed session.
Motion to go into closed session.
Second.
All righty. I'll say aye, starting with Andy.
Aye.
Ashley. Keith.
Aye.
Michelle.
Aye.
Wallace.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion approved. We are now adjourned from the regular session and in closed session.